where we are prepared to show the public for the very first time video from inside of Robb Elementary School, the hallway that led to the classroom where a gunman with an assault rifle killed 19 students and 2 teachers back on May 24th. Now we're doing this for these people, for their families in Uvalde, for the people of the city, and really the people of the state of Texas who have been desperate to learn what happened inside that school back in May.
In about 2 minutes, a small part of the video will air here on KVUE, and we'll have more clips online. The video is hard to watch. You will see the gunman walk down the hallway. You will hear gunfire. You will also see a small army of law enforcement officers in that hallway for more than an hour before finally making it into the classroom.
But let us also explain what you will not see in the video we are about to air. You will not see anyone being shot. You will not hear the screams of the victims that day. You will not see any blood or gore from the violence that occurred at Robb Elementary School. You will simply see the hallway outside of that classroom.
Now, there have been calls from all parts of government and law enforcement to release this video, the audio and the video, to the public. Just yesterday, in fact, Governor Greg Abbott spoke with us here live on KVUE and called for it to be released.
That video needs to be released, as well as the audio. So there's both audio and video of exactly what happened in that school, and everything that does not contain images of those who lost their lives and the victims should be released to the public. As you know, reporters have seen it, stories have been written about it. There is no law enforcement reason that I can see why that video should not be released, and I'm urging.
The Department of Public Safety and the head of the State House Committee looking into the shooting are also supportive of the video being released. State Representative Dustin Burrows says he plans to release it Sunday after meeting with families in Uvalde. And the families of the Uvalde victims are literally marching in the streets calling for transparency. KVUE and our sister station in San Antonio have been in contact with some of the victims' families. All but one we've talked with are in support of this video being released.
Senior investigative reporter Tony Plohetski is here with us now to walk us through the video. Tony, you've seen this. According to your sources and reporting, you were able to obtain this video. We know it's going to be difficult. You know firsthand it's difficult to see what's on this video. So kind of peel back the reporting, if you can, on the curtain here of the video, the calls for its release, and why it's important to show the video to the public.
Well, as we first reported about 2.5 weeks ago, I was able to view the video in a private setting, but more recently we have been able to obtain the video. As you can imagine, given the gravity of this situation, we have spent time going through it very carefully. We want to bring as much information as we can to the public and, as you mentioned, to those family members in Uvalde who have been seeking additional information. Again, just before we begin showing it, we do want to warn people once more. As I have been saying for 2 weeks now, this video is very disturbing. It is very difficult to watch. But at this point, I think we should begin showing our first portion. We've divided it into several clips, edited clips. Of course, we're not going to show all 77 minutes of it.
That's right. As Tony mentioned, we're going to go through this in segments we've identified as being significant for one reason or another to our understanding of what happened in that school on that day. In the very first clip you're about to see, it shows just how fast the gunman is able to get into the building there, into the school, and then ultimately into a classroom. So let's go ahead and begin. Watch the beginning of that. Again, you will hear the sound of gunfire in the video, though we have taken the audio out of portions of the video. Let's watch.
And again, we know now that that gunfire went on for about 2 minutes inside that classroom. Brian and Ashley, I've been talking about it publicly several times now, but I think obviously one of the most striking images there is watching that small child emerging from the bathroom, peering around the corner and knowing that an armed gunman was in his school. And then, of course, just seeing with the ease and casualness that the gunman entered the school, walked down that hall, into that classroom.
And for about the next 3 minutes of the video that we've obtained here at KVUE, you can hear the burst of gunfire. You could hear screaming coming faintly from down that hallway. Again, that video from a surveillance camera mounted on the wall there at Robb Elementary School. Looking down to the hallway, you could see the gunman enter the classroom, which was there on the left-hand side. And immediately upon entering that, you could hear the gunfire. We do know that the children and teachers were in that classroom at the time. And it's really shocking with the ease with which he walked right into the hallway to get in there with no one really other than that child seeing him as he entered the hallway.
Absolutely. And authorities have said that the back door that he apparently entered, was obviously not locked at the time. There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not the classroom door was locked at the time that we entered it. But what investigators have said is that that may be one of the, unknown questions about the tragedy of what happened that day.
And I think we have to realize whether that door was locked or not, he would have been able to likely get into that classroom, Tony.
Absolutely.
With the firepower that he had.
Yes.
Again, we do have the entirety of the video. We have edited into segments. The next segment we're going to show you is when the first officers arrive on the scene. This is about 3 minutes after the video we just showed you when the gunman entered. So Tony, if you can, take us through kind of what we're seeing in the video as the officers arrive there into Robb Elementary School. You can still hear the shooting in the background.
So we know about 3 minutes after this happened that a number of officers from the Uvalde City Police Department, as well as from the school district, arrived.
About half a dozen officers, at least one with a rifle that we can see protective vests on. More and more begin to arrive there. They initially pursue the gunman. You could see them go in the hallway there toward the classroom where the gunman was. They were then, you could hear, met with a blast of gunfire there. We assumed that was the gunman firing back at them from inside the classroom. They scattered and then retreat as well, Ashley, through the end of the hallway. And you can see them kind of taking up cover there on that end of the hallway.
Yeah, in fact, they're going to scatter here more so than what you see right now.
Yeah, they actually at this moment have not made their approach. They're just about to do that when there is an exchange of gunfire.
So this is again about 4 minutes now into the more gunfire from inside. You can see the officers scrambling on that. At least 3 officers now retreat back down the hallway, knowing the armed subject is in the classroom. And I think this is the part when families are going to understand the officers were there inside the building within minutes of the gunman entering the classroom. They will stay in this area for about, Tony, the next 45 minutes.
That's right.
It's almost, Tony, as if they're preparing for him to come out. We know that that does not happen. That's not what we see. And
what authorities have said is that the incident commander on the scene that day then began treating this like a barricaded subject, and in terms of doing so would have required a slower, more methodical law enforcement response instead of an active shooter, during which we know from talking to law enforcement experts, the job of police officers is to do anything at that point to try to save the lives of innocent people. And again, when we look at that video, we see them being pushed back. But I think what is going to be so difficult for people to grapple with is what happens next.
Well, and not only that, it's the fact that they are aware that there are gunshots. They're aware that there is shooting happening as they are standing in the hallway.
That's right, Ashley.
All right, so let's look at this next segment here. This is actually a time lapse. So we have sped this up because not a lot happens for a period of time for about 45 minutes. Tony, what are we seeing happening?
Well, over that next 45 minutes, we see a number of officers arrive. We see added protective gear arrive. We see high-powered weapons arrive. We see officers donned in all sorts of protective equipment. At one point, you can see it there, they bring in tear gas canisters and put them down. So just a lot of movement among a growing number of law enforcement officials in that hallway. And I want to be clear, we're talking about law enforcement officials from a variety of agencies. The Uvalde City Police Department, the school district, the Uvalde County Sheriff's Office, the Texas Department of Public Safety was there, federal agents were there, a number of federal agents were there. And so when Colonel Steve McCraw, who heads the Texas Department of Public Safety, describes this as an abject failure of law enforcement, he wasn't just referring to one agency. He was referring to law enforcement as a whole that, again, in his words, failed to act in a timely manner, again, as those gunshots were happening. One thing I do want to point out is during that time that you see that time lapse, there is additional gunfire coming from the shooter. So Ashley, to your point earlier, they knew that there was active shooting, or should have known that there was active shooting going on at that time.
And there's one big discrepancy that I'd like to point out at this point about what we were told the day of and the day immediately following, that the officers exchanged gunfire with the gunman as he entered and as he walked down the hallway, which clearly, as we've now seen, that was not the case. The officers arrived about 3 minutes after the gunman was in the classroom. So that's a huge discrepancy. I know that a lot of families there were wondering how that could have happened, and clearly it didn't happen the way it was described initially.
That's exactly right. And one additional point that I wanted to make too is that we don't know why they responded or didn't respond the way they did. We are seeing for the first time that they in fact did not respond for more than an hour after trying to make that initial entry into that classroom. But what is still unexplained, and what the story that this video does not tell, is why. And certainly a lot of finger pointing has been at the school district police chief, but at the same time, I think people are going to have a very difficult time reconciling that there was that many police officers in that hallway, and yet no movement was made until 12:50 p.m. Keep in mind that the gunman entered the school at 11:30 a.m., 11:33 a.m.
We should also point out on that time lapse, you saw the time lapse, but we were also showing you an alternate view as well, stuff that was happening outside. Again, more law enforcement outside the school as well, right?
Absolutely. And you see them talking on their cell phones. You can see them texting. At one point, they are clearly looking at what appears to be a markup of the school, a diagram of the school and of that hallway. But the great unanswered question is why they did not take more aggressive steps sooner, with experts telling us over the past several weeks that in a situation like that, what law enforcement is trained to do are take any steps, possibly going through a window, going through the roof, ripping out sheetrock. One expert said even if you must drive a car into the building, you have to do something to stop an active shooter.
Let's pick up the video again. At this point, the officers, at the end of that time lapse, the officer had been in place and outside there for about 45 minutes at Robb Elementary School. And then there's another short burst of gunfire coming from the classroom that seems to escalate things at this point, Tony.
That's right. This is at 12:21. And again, you can see them possibly beginning to take some steps to try to take down the gunman, but that ultimately did not happen for some period of time. This is at 12:21. Keep in mind, it was not until 12:50 that officials ultimately moved in and took the gunman down.
So they were there for about half an hour or so after that initial time lapse video that we showed. There was another half hour until that when they initially, or for the second time, I guess, began to walk through the hallway.
That's right. And you can see in that clip that we just had, again, they are heavily armed. They have assault rifles. They have all kinds of protective equipment.
And they seem to be in some sort of position. Again, 45 minutes.
That's right.
More than 45 minutes have passed. And any indication, Tony, when you've watched this, all the times that you've seen this, as to why they didn't go in at that point?
There just seems to not be a clear explanation.
Right.
I think if there is an explanation, it's going to largely have to come from the testimony of officers who were interviewed about the mindset and their mindset and what their understanding was about what was happening in that classroom.
Right. So we have another time-lapse video. So they've heard a new round of gunfire, the first in about 45 minutes. They advanced down the hall. It looks like they were getting close to some kind of action, but again, they stall, and this is what happens next.
Multiple officers, and you can see they're still staging right there at the end, coming back and forth. The gunman this entire time, Tony, we know now, was in the classroom, which, of course, it's difficult for us to even imagine, but for the families seeing this now, some of them maybe for the first time, to see the response and the time it took for them to get into the position to take out the gunman is just, I can't even imagine what that's like.
And one thing that is also important to point out again as well is that there were 911 calls coming in from people inside that classroom saying, please help, there's a gunman, please help.
Just heartbreaking. All right, once again, they finally go in, and at the end, the video we're about to show you, this is the end. It's over pretty quickly. Take a look at how this all finishes inside the school. You can hear the gunfire. Officers move into the classroom. If you can see just down at the end of the hallway there, at the top of your screen, they move into the classroom and they take out the shooter. And Tony, we do know from previous reporting that it's by now there are DPS officers there, state officers there as well at this point, in addition to the local police, the local sheriff's department?
That's exactly right. And ultimately, it is the Border Patrol that takes down the gunman. They actually lead the assault team inside that classroom. We're told that at that point, the gunman was actually in a closet, but did emerge when they breached that door and went inside that classroom, and that is where the gunman was killed by law enforcement.
We should say again, as we mentioned at the top of this segment, why we chose to show this today, because first of all, the governor called for the release of the video right here on KVUE yesterday. We felt as a station it was important to be as transparent as possible with the families and the people that are asking the questions, and have been for more than 2 months now, Tony, to show the video, to show the response, to show really the aftermath of kind of all these entities coming together, and to show exactly how long it took, Tony.
Absolutely, and I want to say that this is not a decision that we have taken lightly. We have carefully considered what we are doing here. We know that there will be people out there who maybe do not agree with our decision to air these clips. But again, when you think of the families who have called for transparency, the highest levels of our state government have called for transparency, and we found ourselves in a position once we obtained this video that we similarly did not feel it was in our interest to withhold it from the public as well. But I do want to underscore our decision-making process there, but that ultimately this is about those family members and the people of Uvalde and our state and even our country, of course. So many people have been keeping up with what happened that terrible day and the aftermath of what happened that awful day.
It's such a difficult thing for us to watch, difficult things for us to talk about, and to see, frankly, the failure that happened to these children and those two teachers that day. We are going to have several of these clips on KVUE.com as well as our YouTube channel for those of you who are interested in seeing more.
That's right. For getting context, for perspective from law enforcement analysts about the police response. For the newscast, we'll have more of that in our newscast later tonight. Of course, you can see that at 5, 6, and 10 p.m. Here tonight.
And you know, remember, at the end of the day, all of this comes back to these faces, these victims and their families who have been crying for answers and frankly have not been able to get them from their government.
We'll return you now to regular programming. Again, you can see more of the story tonight on KVUE News at 5 and 6.